until you understand. Sithole reveled in his first kill and began planning his next one.
After he committed the act, the fantasizing takes basically control of his life. The acts just become more violent, more gruesome, more grisly, because he needs his urge to be satisfied.
He's got this addiction to the omnipotent power where he thinks he's actually God and he is in control.
The only screaming was, "Please, don't kill. Do anything, but don't kill me." Some of them will pray to me like a god.
By July 1994, South African Moses Sithole had progressed from rape to murder. Over the next 4 months, he assaulted and strangled 5 women. Inspector Leon Nell was part of a manhunt for the elusive serial killer. Sithole had managed to stay one step ahead of police.
Right from the outset, we had problems. We were busy with a post-mortem in Johannesburg mortuary. When they would call, there's another scene.
The police would go and remove the body, process the crime scene, and 2 days later you'd have a body at the same spot. That's very arrogant.
The local papers gave detailed accounts about how the killer cleverly lured his victims into the veld. The notoriety only fueled Sithole's desire for violence.
Very often serial killers are thrill-seeking. They love the media attention. They absolutely adore to be the pivot around which so much activity goes on.
As Sithole grew more adept at killing, he developed an intricate system for attracting victims. First, he would approach a woman who was looking for work, and he would claim to have a high-paying job for her. Then, he would slowly earn her trust. After interviewing relatives of Sithole's victims, Police Superintendent Vinyl Viljoen noticed a pattern.
He says he'll be able to help her to get work. Then he'll make another appointment with her. Then they'll sit and just discuss ordinary things, drink cold drinks, and then make another appointment. Then he'll say to her, "Okay, let me take you to where I can get you a work."
In the final phase, Sithole would arrange to meet the woman in a crowded area where they wouldn't be noticed. Sithole would then flag down one of the hundreds of minibuses that work as taxis in the black areas of Johannesburg. Investigators believed that Sithole acted out this elaborate hoax because he found pleasure in manipulating his victims.
So we mustn't just isolate the rape and the murder as the crime, but rather what happens before, during and after. Even while he's walking with his victims, he's already successful. He's convincing them to come with him.
Sithole would have the minibus drop them off near an opening to the veld. Not an uncommon request, as footpaths through the fields were often used as shortcuts. He would lead his victim down the path and out of sight, then take out his knife and make her disrobe.
He could not just control the life of the woman that he was about to kill, but he also could control her emotions. He could make her so scared, most probably pleading for help, but it must have increased his feeling of being powerful tremendously.
After raping the woman, he would often strangle her with her own underwear.
When you strangle a person, you can actually release your hold and the person will regain consciousness. And if you put pressure, they can actually lose consciousness again. So you can extend the period of death. It's every serial killer's fantasy.
Sithole would torture his victim. He had learned how to kill slowly.
He used quite sophisticated systems where he would take the strap from the victim's handbag, put it around their neck, and tie it to a low branch on a tree.
It was another technique that would prolong Sithole's sensation of ultimate power.
And he would sit and watch while the victim stood there. And eventually, after an hour or two, the victim was unable to stand upright any longer and would lower themselves and actually strangle themselves.
At a certain point, rape and murder were not enough for Sithole. He began to taunt the families of his victims. He called the grandmother of one woman and told her, "It serves you well. You are now walking over the grave of Monica." Sithole now believed he could manipulate anyone at will.
Moses Sithole also once phoned the police anonymously and gave them a name of his brother-in-law or somebody, which the detectives actually picked up and interrogated. And when the guy got home, he would tell Moses Sithole about the interrogation, which I think was a very clever way for Moses to find out what do they know and what do they ask.
But his friends and relatives still believed that he was leaving the house each day to look for work. On December 5th, 1994, his wife Martha gave birth to a baby girl. She had no idea that her husband was a killer. By July 1995, Moses Sithole had strangled 18 young women and discarded their bodies in the fields outside of Pretoria and Johannesburg. Police pursued every lead they had, but still couldn't put a name or face on the killer.
The detectives and myself, we do get very demoralized. It is a very stressful period, especially if it is extended. And you do eventually feel responsible for the women who killed. It's another innocent life.
Whenever a serial killer is on the loose, the community in which such a person operates is becoming extremely frightened.
We have to be actually careful that we don't walk at night alone. We don't do the things that will actually make us to be targets.
South African women had become more cautious, and Sithole needed a more sophisticated plan for luring his victims. He read the newspaper daily and kept abreast of the changing conditions in the country. In time, he began to see a way to take advantage of the social reform. Sithole, who had grown up mostly in orphanages, invented a fictitious social service agency called Youth Against Human Abuse. The supposed mission of the organization was to reunite orphans and their families. He claimed he was looking for new employees and began distributing phony job applications to women. In August 1995, Sithole got in touch with a prominent photographer and introduced himself and his organization. Sithole told the man that he needed to find a group home for 2 homeless children. The photographer helped him get access to a children's home called Kids Haven. Outside the center's laundry, he met Trifina Mahotsi, a single mother who supported an extended family by working at Kids Haven. Trifina's friend and co-worker, Esther Malangu, remembers that day.
She was staying with her mother and 1 sister and 2 brothers in Pretoria. And she was the only person who was working.
He offered Trifina a hefty bonus if she would come work for Youth Against Human Abuse. Trifina quickly took an application.
She was thinking I'm going to support all my family. So she was happy, very much happy.
Sithole returned the next day to tell Trifina that her application had been accepted. He made an appointment to take her to her new job. He would meet her at the train station and they would travel together.
I was very much jealous about Trifina. She's going to get a new job and a huge money like that.
But Trifina was never heard from again. Her disappearance would eventually lead investigators to Moses Sithole. By August 1995, Moses Sithole had killed 20 women. He had dumped their bodies in the isolated areas around Johannesburg. On the morning of the 15th, he left his home in Atteridgeville and took the train to Benoni on his way to meet Trifina Mahotsi. Sithole had promised to take her to a new job, but instead, he led her into a remote field and strangled her. When Trifina didn't come home, her sister Noketi began to worry.
We started to panic and my mother stood up and went to the police stations.
The newspapers published a photo of the missing woman. 1 month later, a police reservist stumbled across a field near Boksburg prison littered with bodies. Trifina Mahotsi's body was one of the 10 found there. The black community held a prayer vigil for the murdered women and demanded swift justice.
As a black man in that community, if I know that you did that to my sister, my mother, my daughter, I'm not going to wait